The emergency room is unusually quiet. Monitors hum. Shoes squeak on polished floors. A nurse in blood-stained blue scrub stands near the exit, her badge already clipped off, a security officer waiting beside her. No one looks at her anymore. Then the silence breaks. Automatic doors slide open hard. Military boots strike the floor in perfect rhythm. A trauma gurney rolls in fast, surrounded by armed soldiers who do not slow down for anyone. Doctors freeze. Nurses step back. The wounded man on the gurney lifts his head just enough to look around the ER. His voice is calm. Controlled. Where is my nurse? Every eye turns. They were wrong about her. The emergency room moved the way it always did at the end of a long day, fast, tired, precise enough to keep the wheels on. Fluorescent lights washed everything the same pale color. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. She had been on her feet for 11 hours. The nurse moved from bay to bay without drawing attention. She adjusted an 4 rate without being asked. Replaced a monitor lead before the alarm could sound. Caught a dosage error on a chart and corrected it quietly, sliding the paper back into the rack as if it had always been right. No one thanked her. No one noticed. Doctors passed her with clipped instructions, already turning away before she answered. Newer nurses deferred to her without knowing why, mirroring her movements, lowering their voices when she spoke. She never raised hers. Her badge read registered nurse, nothing more. No pins. No extra lettering. Just a name and a number. At the charge desk, an administrator watched her from across the room. Mid-40s. Gray blazer. Tablet always in hand. The look wasn't concern, it was accounting. Time, liability, compliance. The nurse felt it without turning around. A trauma alert came in. Motorcycle collision. She took the lead by instinct, positioning the gurney, calling for blood before the resident finished speaking. When the patient crashed, she moved faster than the room, hands steady, voice low, eyes already tracking the next step. The patient stabilized. The resident took credit. No one corrected him. Later, in the supply room, she cleaned blood from her forearms at the sink. The water ran pink, then clear. She checked her watch. 2 hours left. A clipboard appeared beside her. Administration needs a word, the woman in the blazer said. Polite voice. Tight mouth. The nurse dried her hands. Followed. They stopped near the exit corridor, far enough from patients to be private, close enough to remind her where she stood. A security officer waited nearby, pretending not to. Multiple reports, the administrator said, scrolling. Failure to follow chain of command. Unauthorized decision-making. Non-compliance with updated protocol. The nurse listened. She didn't interrupt. She had learned long ago that explanations were rarely wanted. I kept the patient alive, she said when the list ended. That isn't the point, the administrator replied. This is a hospital, not a battlefield. The words landed harder than they were meant to. The nurse nodded once. The administrator exhaled, relieved by the lack of resistance. Effective immediately, we're terminating your shift. HR will handle the rest. A badge clip snapped open. Her access card was removed. The nurse felt the absence like a weight lifted and replaced by another. She handed over her pager. Untied her scrub cap. Slipped her shoulder bag on. Around them, the ER continued. A child cried. A monitor beeped. Life went on. She walked toward the exit calmly, posture straight, steps unhurried. She did not look back. No one followed her gaze. No one realized what they had just sent out the door. The corridor outside the emergency room was quieter than it should have been. Not empty, just hollow. Sound behaved differently there, as if it had learned to keep its distance. The nurse stopped near the vending machines, setting her bag down at her feet. She stood with her back to the wall, letting the moment pass. No shaking hands. No visible anger. Only a slow, controlled breath in through her nose. Then out. Through the glass doors, she could still see the ER. The rhythm was off. A trauma nurse fumbled with tubing. A resident hesitated too long before ordering labs. Small things. Harmless on their own. But stacked together, they formed a pattern. The kind that came before something broke. She watched without moving. A security guard shifted his weight nearby, uncomfortable with the silence. "You need anything?" he asked. "No," she said. "Thank you." He nodded, relieved by the simplicity, and stepped away. Inside, the administrator was already talking to someone else, her attention moving on as if a line item had been cleared. The nurse felt no urge to confront her. Confrontation burned energy. Energy was a resource. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. "You good?" One of the night nurses. Younger. Smart. Still believed the system noticed effort. She typed back, "I'm fine. Stay sharp." No explanation. No goodbye. A stretcher rolled past the glass, pushed too fast. The nurse's eyes tracked the angle of the patient's neck, the uneven rise of the chest. Intubation would be needed. Soon. She wasn't there to say it. The nurse bent, tightened the strap on her bag, and adjusted her jacket over her scrubs. The bloodstains were still faintly visible. She hadn't changed them on purpose. Not defiance, just accuracy. They told the truth of the day better than words. As she turned toward the exit, a sound cut through the corridor. Not an alarm. Not yet. A low, distant vibration. Too steady to be equipment. Too heavy to be traffic. She stopped. The building's glass trembled almost imperceptibly. A second vibration followed, closer this time, resonating through the floor. The nurse felt it in her feet before she heard it clearly. Rotors. She glanced back toward the ER. No one else had noticed. Or if they had, they dismissed it as background noise. Hospitals were full of noise. People learned to ignore what they couldn't categorize quickly. The vibration grew louder. More deliberate. The nurse's jaw set, just slightly. A memory surfaced, not visual, but procedural. Timelines. Ingress points. The way hospitals locked down when something arrived that didn't belong to civilian schedules. She took out her phone again, typed a single message, and sent it to the same number as before. Incoming. You'll feel it before you hear it. She slipped the phone away. By the time the automatic doors opened and she stepped outside, the sound was unmistakable. A helicopter descending fast, close enough that the wind pushed against a building. Behind her, inside the ER, someone finally looked up. The nurse didn't turn around. She knew what was coming. And she knew they were about to realize how quiet the warning signs had been. The automatic doors slid shut behind her with a soft, final sound. Outside, the air was cooler. Sharper. The hospital's glass facade reflected a version of herself that felt slightly removed: blue scrubs, jacket half-zipped, hair pulled back tight. She looked like what they thought she was. Temporary. The helicopter hadn't landed yet, but it was close. The noise pressed down on the space between buildings, turning heads now, drawing security toward the perimeter. The nurse walked along the sidewalk instead of away from it, stopping near the ambulance bay. She stayed where she could see both entrances. A mistake, she thought. Firing her now. Inside, the ER shifted again. Not into panic, into confusion. Phones rang unanswered. Someone called for a supervisor who didn't respond fast enough. The administrator reappeared near the nurse's station, irritation bleeding into her voice. "Why is security moving?" she asked no one in particular. No one answered. The first soldier entered through the main doors without slowing. No raised weapon. No shouting. Just controlled movement and eyes that measured distance and threat in the same glance. Then another. Then two more. The ER froze. The nurse watched through the glass as hospital protocol collided with something that did not recognize it. A security guard stepped forward, hand half raised, already unsure. The soldiers didn't push past him. They didn't need to. One of them showed a credential so quickly it barely registered. The guard stepped aside on instinct. The gurney came next. Blood soaked through the sheets. The man on it was conscious, jaw clenched, breath measured through pain. His uniform wasn't ceremonial. It was worn. Functional. Marked by use. This was not a drill. The nurse felt the pull, then the familiar pressure behind the sternum that came when timing mattered and options narrowed. She stayed where she was. Stayed out. Inside, the ER staff rushed to meet the gurney. Orders overlapped. A resident tried to assert control and lost it halfway through his sentence. The patient's vitals dipped. The monitors protested. Someone asked for a trauma lead. No one answered quickly enough. The administrator pushed forward, voice sharp. We need to clear non-essential personnel. A soldier looked at her. Just looked. She stopped talking. The gurney rolled deeper into the ER. Doors closed. The noise muffled. Outside, the nurse finally turned away. She walked toward the far end of the lot, where the sound of rotors thinned and the hospital's glow dimmed. Each step put more concrete between her and the room she knew better than most of the people still inside it. Her phone buzzed again. They're asking questions, the message read. Real ones. She didn't reply. Termination was clean on paper. In reality, it left a vacuum. And vacuums never stayed empty for long. Behind her, inside the hospital, someone was already realizing that the nurse they'd removed was the one person who understood what had just arrived. The realization came too late. Inside Trauma Bay 3, time began to fold in on itself. The wounded man was transferred with precision, the soldiers stepping back only when the ER team physically replaced them. Blood soaked the sheets beneath him. His breathing was controlled, almost deliberate, as if he were rationing air instead of losing it. A resident read vitals aloud, voice too fast. A nurse reached for the wrong size catheter and corrected herself at the last second. The room was full of motion, but no one was fully in control. The commander's eyes stayed open. He watched hands. Listened to tone. Counted seconds between decisions. Pressure's dropping, someone said. Hang another unit, another voice answered. They were reacting. Not leading. The commander shifted slightly, pain flashing across his face before he smothered it. His gaze moved to the doorway, then to the ceiling, then back to the staff around him. He knew the room wasn't ready. Not for him. Not for what followed injuries like this. Outside the bay, the administrator hovered, whispering into her phone, already framing the incident in terms of exposure and oversight. She glanced at the soldiers with barely concealed irritation. This is a civilian hospital, she said to no one in particular. We need to maintain. A senior nurse cut her off without looking up. We're busy. It was the closest thing to defiance the administrator had heard all day. She stiffened, then retreated half a step. Inside the bay, the monitors spiked and dipped again. The resident hesitated, fingers hovering over the chart. The commander's jaw tightened. Had seen this before. Good people. Capable people. But none of them had the full picture. None of them understood the way his injuries interacted with the stress already running through his system. He spoke quietly. That line won't hold, he said. The room paused. Heads turned toward him. Patients weren't supposed to talk like that. The resident frowned. Sir, please try not to. It'll fail in under a minute, the commander continued, voice steady. You'll lose pressure. You'll chase it. You'll be behind. Silence. One of the nurses glanced at the four. Adjusted the clamp. Her expression changed. He's right, she said. It's already slipping. They corrected it. Barely in time. The resident swallowed. Tried to recover authority. Okay. Let's. The commander's eyes drifted back to the doorway. Where is my nurse? He asked. The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Confusion rippled through the room. Someone laughed nervously, assuming shock. Someone else checked the chart, expecting a name they'd missed. "We have plenty of nurses here," the resident said carefully. The commander shook his head once. "Not her." Outside the bay, the administrator heard the question and stiffened. Her mind raced, flipping through rosters. The names surfaced, inconvenient and unwelcome. The one they had just walked out. A soldier stepped closer to the gurney, lowering his voice. "Sir, she was removed," the commander finished for him. "Not a question." The soldier nodded. The commander closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the pain was still there. But so was clarity. "Bring her back," he said. No rank was stated. No threat implied. The soldier moved immediately. In the corridor, the administrator watched him pass and felt, for the first time that day, the ground shift beneath her feet. The soldier didn't ask permission. He moved through the corridor with purpose, past nurses pressed against walls, past security officers who suddenly found reasons not to intervene. His radio stayed silent. He didn't need guidance. The order had already been given. Outside, near the edge of the lot, the nurse stood with her back to the building, eyes on the horizon. The helicopter had lifted again, leaving the air unsettled. She felt the shift before she heard footsteps. "You need to come with me," the soldier said. She turned slowly. Took him in. The uniform. The bearing. The way his hand rested near but not on his weapon. "I don't work here anymore," she said. "We know," he replied. "He asked for you anyway." The nurse considered that. Not the request, the implication. She glanced once at the hospital doors, where light spilled out onto the pavement. A boundary she had already crossed once today. "Is he stable?" she asked. "For now." She nodded. "Then don't waste time." They walked back together. No urgency in her pace, but no hesitation either. As they entered, conversations faltered. People noticed her before they understood why. The administrator saw her and went rigid. "You can't just," she began, stepping forward. The soldier stopped without turning. "You can wait here." It wasn't rude. It wasn't loud. It was final. Inside Trauma Bay 3, the air felt heavier. The commander's eyes tracked the doorway as she entered. Recognition passed between them, not relief, not sentiment. Alignment. "You're late," he said quietly. "You were hard to find," she replied. The exchange drew looks. The resident stiffened. "Who is this?" The commander didn't answer him. He kept his gaze on the nurse. "They're chasing the bleed," he said. "Wrong angle." She moved without responding, hands already pulling on gloves. She leaned over the patient, eyes scanning monitors, lines, the subtle signs the room had missed. "Rotate him," she said. 5 degrees. Now. The resident hesitated. "That's not." "Now," she repeated. "Not louder. Just precise." The commander nodded once. They moved him. The monitor steadied. The room went quiet. The nurse adjusted the 4, checked the wound, then stepped back just enough to see the whole picture. Her face gave nothing away. "Prep for surgical consult," she said. "And secure the perimeter. This isn't done." The resident stared at her. "On whose authority?" The commander answered for her. "Mine." That landed differently. The administrator hovered in the doorway, watching control slip from her grasp. The nurse felt it but didn't look. She had returned for one reason only. When the immediate danger passed, she stepped back again. Removed her gloves. Met the commander's eyes. "You're going to make it," she said. "I know," he replied. "Because you're here." She didn't respond. The soldier who had brought her in watched her with something close to respect. Not gratitude. Recognition. Outside the bay, the administrator finally spoke. "We need to discuss her status." The nurse turned to leave. You can, she said. Later. She walked away before anyone could stop her. The question had been asked. The answer was unfolding. The ER settled into a fragile rhythm. Not controlled. The difference mattered. The nurse stayed near Trauma Bay 3, never in the center of the room, never claiming space that wasn't offered. She watched the flow instead. Who moved with confidence? Who hesitated? Where tension pooled? The crisis hadn't ended. It had only narrowed. Security tightened at the entrances. Soldiers took positions without blocking sightlines, careful not to turn the hospital into a checkpoint. The nurse noticed the discipline and adjusted her movements to match it. No sudden turns. No wasted steps. Inside the bay, the commander's vitals held steady, but just barely. The internal bleeding was contained, not solved. Surgery would be necessary, but timing mattered. Too soon, and they risked collapse. Too late, and there would be nothing left to save. The surgeon arrived with authority and impatience. He glanced at the chart, then at the soldiers. We're not equipped for this level of. He's stable because of her, the commander said, nodding toward the nurse. The surgeon followed his gaze. Took her in. The scrubs. The lack of insignia. The calm. And who is she? He asked. The nurse answered before anyone else could. Someone you can ignore if you want, she said. But you shouldn't. There was no challenge in her voice. Just information. The surgeon studied the monitors again. Then the patient. Then her. Well, prep the ore, he said. 30 minutes. The administrator reappeared almost immediately, flanked by legal counsel and hospital security. She kept her voice low, controlled, as if volume alone could restore order. This situation does not reinstate her employment, she said. Any involvement beyond immediate necessity exposes us. The nurse turned to face her fully for the first time. He'll leave, she said. As soon as he's out of danger. The administrator opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. The words didn't matter anymore. Everyone in the room understood that the nurse was no longer operating under hospital rules alone. The cost was clear. She would not be thanked. She would not be protected. The nurse accepted that without visible reaction. As preparations continued, a complication surfaced, blood pressure dropping again, subtly this time. The kind of change that slipped past charts and alarms. The nurse caught it. Adjusted positioning. Changed one variable at a time, careful not to trigger cascade failure. She moved like someone who had learned the price of rushing. The commander watched her work, eyes sharp despite the pain. You didn't have to come back, he said. She didn't look at him. Yes, she replied. I did. Because walking away would have been easier. When the OR team arrived, there was resistance. Protocols. Clearances. Questions about her role. The nurse stepped back then, hands empty, presence reduced to observation. That was the restraint. The hardest part wasn't acting, it was stopping. As they wheeled the commander out, a soldier paused beside her. We owe you, he said quietly. She shook her head once. No, she said. You don't. Debts changed relationships. She wasn't there for that. When the doors to the OR closed, the nurse felt the weight settle fully. The adrenaline drained. The exhaustion arrived all at once. The administrator approached again, voice softer now. Well, need a statement. You'll get one, the nurse said. From them. She reached into her pocket and retrieved her badge clip. Empty now. She placed it on the counter and walked toward the exit. No one stopped her. The crisis was still unfolding, but her part in it had reached its limit. Competence had done its work. And the cost had been paid in full. The operating room doors closed with a final, controlled sound. Inside, the fight continued. Outside, the hospital exhaled slowly, unevenly like a body that had survived a near miss but wasn't ready to believe it yet. The nurse stood alone near the end of the corridor, hands resting loosely at her sides. She didn't watch the doors. She didn't pace. She listened in staccato footsteps, to tone, to the way the building settled back into itself after pressure eased. Minutes passed. Then more. The soldiers remained, but their posture changed. Less alert. More patient. A quiet signal that the worst was over, or close enough to it. A surgeon finally emerged, mask lowered, exhaustion etched into his face. He spoke first to the soldiers, then glanced down the hall toward the nurse. "Hell live," he said. It was close. No one cheered. The soldier nearest her nodded once. Another spoke softly into a radio. The chain of urgency began to loosen, link by link. The administrator arrived moments later, flanked again, but this time, she stopped short of the nurse. She seemed smaller now. Less certain of her footing. "We'll need to discuss earlier," she said carefully. The nurse looked at her for a moment. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. "With someone else," the nurse replied. The administrator hesitated. Then nodded. It was the first concession she had made all night. The commander was moved to recovery under heavy guard. As they passed, his eyes found the nurse's. He lifted 2 fingers, barely perceptibly, a gesture that meant acknowledged, not thanked. She returned it with a single nod. That was enough. When the soldiers began to file out, one lingered. Younger than the others. Less practiced at hiding respect. "They won't forget this," he said. She met his gaze briefly. "They will," she said. "It's easier." He thought about that. Then accepted it. The ER resumed its rhythm. Patients came in. Others left. Stories began to rewrite themselves quietly, already losing detail. By morning, the narrative would be neat. Administrative. Safe. The nurse walked toward the exit without ceremony. No escort this time. No one tried to stop her. Outside, dawn crept over the parking lot, washing the hospital in pale light. She paused once, adjusting the strap of her bag, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders shed ignored all night. A phone buzzed in her pocket. "He's asking for you again," the message read. She didn't answer. Some things were finished when they were finished. She crossed the lot and disappeared beyond the edge of the light, returning to the quiet space where her name carried no weight and no one expected anything from her. Inside the hospital, order had been restored. Because of her. And no one would say it out loud. The end came without applause. Without recognition. Without record. Just the way she preferred it.